Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. And in today's first battle, because you're getting the edited highlights of two battles in today's video, we have, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that actually, Wienerkorv? Wienerkorv? We're going to go with Wiener because, you know, that's funnier. And this is the reason why you're having the edited highlights of two battles in today's video, because he does a ridiculous amount of damage in this game. Well, why not just show this full battle? Well, that's the thing. You see, I've had people send me World of Tanks replays and then complain that it never got shown because I did way more damage than anything else you've ever shown before. Well, yeah, but you did 13,000 damage in a tier 9 tank destroyer, sitting in the same bush for the entire game. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's, you know, doing what tank destroyers are basically supposed to do. But it's dull as dishwater to watch. And that was kind of the issue with this battle. You see, Wiener is in the Henri IV. French tier 10, well, technically battle cruiser, I suppose. Big gun cruiser. It's a heavy cruiser. And he spends an awful lot of time kiting around the map, just shooting at targets a very, very long distance away. And that's absolutely what you're supposed to do in this ship, because it's extremely fast. It's got seriously large guns, with amazing armor penetration, high explosive performance that rivals the Zao, but its armor is trash, it's a huge target, and its concealment is garbage. So if you unlock this ship and you're tempted to think, well, hey, I have myself a tier 10 heavy cruiser, 240mm guns, 9 of them, let's get stuck in, you're probably not going to do too well. The natural place for this ship to exist is way out on the flank of the enemy team at a very safe distance, while that enemy team is showing a nice big fat broadside to you, and they're busy engaging the rest of your team all the way over on the other side of the map. And that is more or less exactly what Wiener does throughout the course of this game. He just keeps the guns firing, and when it looks like things are getting too hot, he just kites away. Exactly the way you're supposed to play this ship. The problem is, it's kind of boring to watch. So I had to think long and hard about putting this replay up. I mean, I wanted to. I really did, because, well, he doesn't do the most damage I've ever heard of anybody doing. But it's the most damage I've ever seen anybody doing. Actually, I don't know. I always have to be careful when I make claims like that. Or I should be careful when I make claims like that, because there's a whole bunch of internet detectives out there who are only too happy to go back through all of my videos just to be able to prove me wrong. Well, actually, Jingles, on the 17th of November 2016, you posted a Gross Occur First video where somebody did over 400,000 damage. Oh, okay, fine, whatever. He does a lot of damage. And I felt that it deserved to be seen, even if it was going to have to be an edited highlight of a game, because sitting through the entire game, and it does take the full 20 minutes, is kind of painful to watch. Not because he does anything wrong, quite the contrary, he pretty much does everything exactly right, but because of the nature of the ship and the way it's meant to be played, it's really boring to watch. Now, just to put things into a slightly broader context for you, what's happened so far is that the team's daring, the British tier 10 destroyer, the one with that ultra long duration hydroacoustic search consumable that makes it next to impossible to be able to land a torpedo on a daring, well, he was the first one to go down to the south there, and he got torpedoed and flooded to death by the enemy Shimakaze. Very quickly after that, the Zao on the team over on the western side of the map managed to get sunk by somebody or other. Meanwhile, back over on this side of the map, the friendly Amagi, the tier 8 battleship, was charging full speed straight into what he thought was just 2 Yamatos, a Massachusetts, and a Shimakaze, and in fact it turned out to be 2 Yamatos, a Massachusetts, a Shimakaze, a Zao, and a Hindenburg, all while being torpedoed from the air by the Shikaku, the enemy carrier. That was more or less the point where Wiener here decided screw this and turned around and started kiting away, all the while keeping up the high explosive spam on the enemy battleships down to the south. The team very quickly lost to Tashkent over to the west, although he did manage to take out Edinburgh with him before being sunk by the enemy Z-52, and it was at about that time, we'd almost caught up, where the Jean Bart on the team thought to himself, well, anything that the Yamagi can do, I can do better, except he couldn't, and managed to get himself sunk by the same cluster of a double Yamato, a Massachusetts, a Shimakaze, a Zhao, a Hindenburg, and an aircraft carrier that sent the Yamagi to the bottom just as quickly. And now we're finally caught up. That friendly Montana appears determined to prove that anything an Yamagi and a Jean Bart can do, he can do better, and I don't think he can. At the same time, though, without wishing to appear too critical of the Yamagi, the Jean Bart, and now the Montana, who are all rushing to certain doom, they have at least recognised that a flank is crumbling, and they're going over to do something about it. The only problem is that they're all going to do something about it one at a time. Nevertheless, their sacrifice has at least ensured that Wiener is able to keep kiting and keep this withering barrage of high explosive fire going. And because of that, he's up to 159,000 damage done, and they almost managed to sink one of the Yamatos, but that's kind of the problem. Almost isn't good enough, and because they almost sank the Yamato is able to survive, send the Montana to the same place that they sent the Yamagi and the Jean Bart, and is now recovering health. Wiener has 160,000 damage done, and he's almost sank a couple of enemy ships. But as we can quite plainly see, almost sinking enemy ships isn't quite good enough, because an enemy ship that has almost been sunk is entirely capable of sinking you. And now that they no longer have anything other than Wiener to shoot at, they're shooting at Wiener. So he has to continue kiting away. He really doesn't have a lot of choice in the matter if he wants to survive, because he may be in a heavy cruiser, but it's still just a cruiser, and he's not going to do any better against that lot than an Yamagi, Jean Bart and Montana did. But he does manage to keep his guns firing, and his damage numbers just keep going higher and higher and higher. But his kill count still hovers stubbornly at the 0 mark, and damage is good. But somebody, doesn't matter whether it's Wiener or anybody else on the team, somebody is going to have to start backing up this damage with actual kills, because damage without kills is meaningless. You can reduce every ship on the enemy team to 1 health, but if you can't kill any of them, you're going to lose. And so before too long, despite having done over 271,000 damage, Wiener and the Implacable, the friendly carrier, pretty soon find themselves the only 2 ships left alive on the team. Oh, and they're being capped. The friendly carrier, the Implacable, is up there to the northwest, and he's rapidly running out of places to hide. His location is well known to the enemy carrier, the Shikaku, who is vectoring dive bombers in to attempt to finish him off. Completely ignoring this, the Implacable is sending his own torpedo bombers over to the friendly cap in an effort to both spot the ships that are currently capping the base, and also to attempt to arrest the capture progress by getting some damage of his own in on them. But he's not going to be able to do it by himself. There are just too many of them. So as far as our friend Wiener here is concerned, the time for kiting and running away is well and truly over. He is going to have to close the distance and fight, whether he wants to or not, whether this ship is any good at that or not, and that of course is exactly what those enemy battleships want to happen. They've gotten sick and tired of chasing him around the map and just chipping away at his health. They want him to come closer, where they can't possibly miss. There's a saying that I'm particularly fond of. Nobody really knows where it comes from. Some say it's an old Chinese proverb, but nobody's really capable of proving it one way or another. And the saying that I'm thinking of is, be careful what you wish for. It might come true. Wiener has a brief brown alert moment when his worst nightmare comes true, caught broadside onto a Yamato in open water at a range of less than 14 kilometers, but at the precise point where the Yamato sailed into line of sight, the Implacable was in visual range and he was busy shooting at him instead, so he's able to get some shots in, set him on fire, do some damage and turn the bows in to present a slightly narrower target. But the Yamato has him targeted with the second salvo, so he bends over, sticks his head between his legs, kisses his ass goodbye, and the Yamato misses every shot that fires. And now the island is in the way, blocking any further salvos from the Yamato, although since he's sufficiently far enough away from it, Wiener is able to keep lobbing shots over, and in the end it didn't really matter whether or not the island was there because the Yamato burned to death. 314,000 damage, Wiener's first confirmed kill. Now remember, it's absolutely no secret that Wiener is coming. He was obviously spotted when he was shooting at the Yamato, and he's been under constant dive bomber and now torpedo bomber attack all the way up here because the Shikaku is right there in the cap circle as well. He's managed to kill the Zhao, and completely dodged what looked like a very, very hasty torpedo drop from the Shikaku. Now he is taking a beating, but they haven't sunk him yet, and remember, sinking things is important. And apparently the Massachusetts didn't get the memo about not giving broadside to a cruiser on with 240mm shells firing armor piercing at point blank range. There's a very good chance that he'll survive this and kill the Shikaku if he can nail the Massachusetts. The Massachusetts has started to angle, but of course Wiener predicted he was going to do that, switched to the high explosive, and continues to do damage to him, finishing him off with the next salvo. At this point, I think it's pretty clear that the Shikaku has realised that he is, to use the correct naval terminology, proper fucked. And it looks like he's doing pretty much the right thing here. He knows he's never going to finish off Wiener with an airstrike before he gets nuked down, so he's going for the ram. And the Shikaku is a pretty quick carrier. But this is one of the fastest cruisers in the game, even without the engine boost up. And the only thing that his ram attempt has really succeeded in doing is exposing a nice big fat broadside for these 240mm armor piercing shells. So it's now 2 on 2. Has Wiener managed to turn this game around? Who wants some more of this? Well, I'm sure Wiener would love to oblige. Unfortunately, have a look at the timer. There are barely 10 seconds of this match left, so it turns out that despite Wiener's Herculean efforts, the enemy team are still ahead on points, and it turns out that 400,000 damage isn't enough to carry a team to victory, unless you can also bag a whole bunch of kills in the process. Next up, in today's main event, we have Hurricane TB in the German Tier 10 destroyer, the Z-52. I like the Z-52, although it's a relatively high skill floor type of destroyer. The torpedoes don't do the most damage, but it's got the fastest reloading torpedoes of any Tier 10 destroyer. And while you can do just fine in the Z-52, firing high explosive at everything in the same way that you normally would in, for example, an American or a Japanese destroyer, you'll be a lot more successful if you use the armor piercing even against other destroyers where it's appropriate, because the high explosive shells on these German destroyers are not particularly good. But if an enemy destroyer does give you the flat broadside to shoot at, and you've switched to armor piercing, you're probably actually going to do a lot more damage. Somebody on the enemy team has made it to the alpha cap point ahead of him, and since both the Fletcher and the Yu Yang on the enemy team are slower than the Z-52, that can only mean that it's the enemy Khabarovsk. And since Russia is the only nation that has destroyers that have worse concealment than the Z-52, and the fact that Hurricane can't see the Khabarovsk must mean that he's on the other side of that island. He pops his hydro, and sure enough, there he is. You kind of have to feel a little bit sorry for the Khabarovsk there, because of the 3 destroyers on Hurricane's team, the Z-52, the Shimakaze, and the Black, the Z-52 is easily the worst destroyer that you want to be sharing a cap circle with if you're in a Khabarovsk. Sure, the Shimakaze has greatly superior stealth, but it can't see through islands. The Black can see through islands because it has radar, but it only lasts 22 seconds. The Z-52's hydro, however, not only lasts forever, but it also has a 6-kilometer range. It's likely that the Khabarovsk captain has worked out that he's sharing the cap circle with the Z-52. which means that he probably understands that for at least the next minute and a half, he's stuck there. He's pinned into position behind that island, and he cannot move. But then again, he's not exactly under any particularly great pressure to move anyway. Nobody can hit him as long as he hugs the side of that island. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, the first casualty of war has just been sent to the bottom by a very surprised Yamato on the enemy team, who doesn't appear to have been expecting to do nearly as many citadels as he just did to the team's Massachusetts Bravo. Astonishingly, the two of them are actually going to compliment each other about it, rather than whine and rage and throw all of their toys out of the pram, which is the usual response. Meanwhile, Hurricane's still playing a very dangerous game of cat and mouse with his Khabarovsk. But the Khabarovsk's patience has finally run out, and he's going to go for it. And that thing is so fast, he's going to completely bypass all of those otherwise perfectly aimed torpedoes. Hurricane's popped his smoke, but he's so close that the Khabarovsk, at least for the moment, can see him anyway. But you can see how much damage the armour piercing is inflicting on the Khabar. I mean, getting into a gunfight with a Khabar is not something that you really want to do in any kind of destroyer. And Hurricane is taking a lot of damage, but the Khabar has launched torpedoes, which of course have been detected because Hurricane's running his hydro. And he's now switched to the high explosive to at least be able to inflict some kind of damage as the Khabar angles away. Hurricane managed to go unspotted for a couple of seconds there as the Khabar's manoeuvres took him outside of automatic detection range, but the torpedoes forced Hurricane to abandon the smoke screen. And so he is continuing to get shot at by, of all things, a Salem. Doesn't the Salem have radar? Why didn't the Salem use his radar? I mean, okay, the Salem's radar isn't as long range as the radar on the Des Moines, but the Salem's only 6 kilometers away. I'm not saying that the Khabarovsk would have survived that encounter if the Salem had used his radar. Hurricane wasn't the only one shooting at the Khabarovsk, but if the Salem had used his radar, the Khabarovsk wouldn't have had to fire a couple of salvos blind, and he might have been able to take Hurricane with him. But the Salem didn't use his radar. Don't understand why not. I mean, that's exactly what the radar is for. It's possible that he didn't understand the shorter range of the Salem's radar and he triggered it early when it was too far away to actually pick anything up. I mean, that's kind of stupid, but it's at least understandable, except no. He's just triggered his radar now, at the precise moment where it isn't going to do any good for anybody whatsoever. Well, hopefully you're not going to be too surprised if I were to tell you that we're going to be seeing more of that Salem and his hilarious misuse of the radar consumable later on in this match towards the end of the battle. But for now, his radar has expired, Hurricane has capped, and with the Khabarovsk dead and the Salem having completely whiffed its radar, he's now free to vacate the cap circle on his own terms, stopping only to send a couple of torpedoes in the general direction of the enemy Bismarck. And that's another one of the good things about the Z-52, the torpedoes. Okay, it doesn't fire as many as certain other Tier 10 destroyers, and they definitely individually don't do as much damage as most other Tier 10 destroyers, but it reloads them faster than anything else, which means by the time 2 of those torpedoes hit that Bismarck, he only has to wait another 20 seconds, and he'll be able to do it all again. And since they're ready to go anyway, it would be rude of him not to, and that's exactly what he does. Now at this point, both teams are still relatively evenly matched, and Hurricane is now heading to try to take control of capture point Bravo from the enemy team. He's asked the friendly Shimakaze if he'd care to join him, but the Shimakaze is kind of occupied dealing with an enemy Yamato. And over in the direction of Bravo, there is a very, very suspicious looking smoke screen, which almost certainly indicates the presence of an enemy destroyer. Now he doesn't know which one it is. It could be the Fletcher, it could be the Yu Yang, but he does have a way of finding out. His hydro is back off cooldown, and remember, it has a 6 kilometer range. This is one of the things that makes the Z-52 exceptionally good at contesting capture points against smoked up enemy destroyers, like the Fletcher over there. Now the Fletcher of course cannot see out of the smoke screen and is entirely dependent on the rest of his team for targeting and spotting information. But there is a Yamato about 7 kilometers to the north that Hurricane just launched some torpedoes at, who would be able to spot him as he's shooting at the Fletcher here. So he's used his own smoke screen just to be on the safe side. Fletcher's starting to angle away, Oh, landed a couple of torpedoes on the Yamato. That's nice. No flooding, however. Switches to the high explosive since the Fletcher is now angled. He's going to be out of hydro range very, very soon. In fact, he is. Didn't quite get the kill. Switches now to the North Carolina. High explosive at first because that's what he had loaded for shooting at the Fletcher, who regrettably managed to escape, intact but on very low health. And then switches back to the armor piercing in order to continue pummeling that North Carolina's superstructure. The North Carolina very wisely decides, screw this, I'm getting out of here, because there could be torpedoes on the way for all he knows. But while all this is going on, ships are getting sunk left, right and centre. And the North Carolina, now on reasonably low health, appears to be heading for what looks like a very decisive, one-sided battle with the friendly Roma. But the North Carolina is not alone down there. Don't forget, that's where the Fletcher ran off to. And I don't know who it is who absolutely chunks the majority of that Roma's health bar. I don't know if it was a broadside salvo from the North Carolina. It might have been. I don't know if it was torpedoes from the Fletcher, but suddenly that fight is not looking quite as one-sided as it may have first appeared. And the North Carolina, or possibly the Roma, it's difficult to tell from this angle, is locked onto a ramming course and speed, and they both take each other out. The good news is that he has managed to chase all of the enemy opposition out of the Bravo cap circle, and he has managed, with no help whatsoever from the Shimakaze, despite asking him for help, he has managed to solo cap Bravo. Unfortunately, the enemy team still hold Charlie, and somebody, and I suspect it's that Salem, is in the process of flipping Alpha. Hurricane has pumped some torpedoes in the general direction of that Yamato, and he's decided that he's going to attempt to find and kill that Fletcher, which is going to be a bit of a risk because he's on low health, although the Fletcher is probably on lower health, but the Fletcher in open water will outspot him. And there he is. Now his guns are pointing in this direction, but the Fletcher is not shooting. Instead, he's dropping smoke and he's turning away. Now it could be that he didn't fancy his chances, which were even at best in a straight-up gunfight with the Z-52. But he doesn't just have guns, does he? Helm hard to starboard. Torpedoes incoming. The Salem, by the way, in case you were wondering, was the one responsible for that salvo of shots that just flew harmlessly overhead. He is the one who has capped Alpha, and he's heading in this direction. Now he's too far away to use his radar at the moment, but that's about it as far as good news goes, because they've just lost their last surviving cruiser. Their Hindenburg has been sunk by the Yamato, which means that Hurricane here and the Shimakaze are the last two surviving ships on their team against 4 enemies. But if he can just land a solid hit on that Fletcher over there, he's going to be able to start doing something about those odds. Fantastic, he got him. However, he is of course being targeted by absolutely everybody who has a clear line of fire to him. So rather than waiting for the time it would take him to cross into the Fletcher's very, very handy smokescreen, he just pops his own. He's slowed down enough to go undetected, and he's adding his own smoke to that exceptionally long-lived American smokescreen that the Fletcher was so very generous to leave for him. However, there is a Salem on the way, and the Salem does have radar, so maybe loitering around inside a smokescreen isn't the best idea ever. And oh shit, there he is. Remember, the Salem's radar has a shorter range than that of the Des Moines, which has a 10-kilometre range. The Salem, 8.5 kilometres, but we kind of saw him when he was 8.9 kilometres away, so you don't really want to be getting any closer to the Salem. At the same time, with a surface detection range of 6.1 kilometres and a Yamato 7 kilometres away, you don't really want to be getting any closer to the Yamato either. So he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place over here. Meanwhile, the Shimakaze is locked in a life-or-death struggle with the Yu-Yang for possession of Capture Point Charlie. The Yu-Yang, on very low health, has just smoked up. Clearly he doesn't have radar, and the Yu-Yang has fired torpedoes into the Shimakaze's smoke screen, but the torpedoes don't appear to have hit anything. Meanwhile, Hurricane's torpedoes are closing in on the Yamato, and the Salem is creeping ever closer. He's managed to get the Yamato. The Salem is only 7 kilometres away, and he's still not using his radar. Even if he thinks that Hurricane is still inside the smokescreen over there, which is now rapidly dissipating, so the answer to that question is no, he wasn't, The smokescreen was within range of the Salem's radar, and the Salem didn't use his radar. We know he didn't use his radar, because if he had, he would have spotted Hurricane. So, I just don't get it. This just doesn't make any sense at all. The Shimakaze, meanwhile, has just won a gun battle with a nyaah, although he is spotted and the Salem is shooting at him. But the kill on the nyaah by the Shimakaze has done two things. First, most obviously, it's put Hurricane's team ahead on points. And Hurricane's there in chat with nothing but good things to say about that Shimakaze. But it also means that the Shimakaze can now capture Charlie completely uncontested. And they're going to need that because they're ahead on points for the moment, but the enemy team do have 2 caps. So in order to win, they're going to have to either flip some caps and at least hold 2 to the enemy's 1, or they're going to have to kill that Salem. But the Salem is a radar cruiser, and neither Hurricane in the Z52 or the Shimakaze player have a huge amount of health left. And do you really want to be hunting a radar cruiser when you know for a fact his radar is ready to go, because he clearly hasn't used it in the last 10 minutes? And trying to do 39,000 damage to him with your torpedoes from the safety of outside of his radar range, it might work, but it's far safer to just go for the caps. And the Shimakaze is doing exactly that. Now the Salem is heading for Bravo, and in fact has started to flip it. So the best thing that Hurricane could do right now is, while the Shimakaze is taking Charlie, he can put some torpedoes in the water against the Salem, sure, you never know your luck. But the best thing for him to do is stay outside of radar range, outside of detection range, and motor at full speed for Alpha to ensure that the team retains control of 2 caps and retains that points lead over the... Why did the Shimakaze leave Charlie? What is he doing? Why is he heading towards a radar cruiser? Why did he abandon the cap? If the Shimakaze dies now without killing that Salem, they've lost, because there is no way that Hurricane on his own can take control of enough caps to beat the points lead that the enemy team already has, which is only going to get bigger if they sink the Shimakaze. Oh my god, I think he's finally used his radar, because he's shooting at the Shimmer. The Shimmer's got some torpedoes away. You know, a minute ago this team was full of nothing but praise for the Shimakaze. Oh, how things change. And you can completely understand it, because the Shimakaze is throwing the game. If he'd just gone for the cap and then evaded the Salem, there is no way the Salem could have won this match. Instead, he's going for the kill, and there's going to be a kill, but it's not the Salem. And the Shimakaze has now handed that Salem a 200-point lead with less than 2 minutes to go. What the hell do you say to that? And then, just as I was struggling to think of something to say, for no apparent reason, the match ended. What? There was still at least a minute to go. The enemy team were ahead on points, although they were nowhere near 1,000 points, and they still had a Salem. I actually had to go back and freeze frame it to figure out what it was that had actually happened. You ready? Pay careful attention, because I did miss it the first time I watched, and there it is. Wow. Yep, the Salem did get him, but not before the Shimakaze got his torpedoes away. Now, I do realise that I'm often quoted as saying, if it's stupid but it works, it's not stupid. Yeah, that might make for a cute soundbite and a quotable line, but it's still stupid. It really, really is. And if it works, against all the odds, you just got incredibly lucky. Because if you got the choice between a guaranteed win by playing smart or a possible win for just a little bit more damage, but you're going to need to get lucky, go for the smart play every time. Then again, if he hadn't, we wouldn't have had the plot twist at the end of today's World of Warships video, so I suppose for that, if nothing else, I can at least be thankful to the Shimakaze player. But I think this one's definitely very much a case of do as I say and not as the Shimakaze did. If for no other reason, then you'll give your teammates a lot less ulcers. Anyway, Hurricane TB, thank you for sending that one in. I have no doubt that everybody watching this video were just as surprised as you and the rest of your team that that battle ended up being a victory. Wiener, my commiserations on your earlier 400,000 damage defeat in the Henri IV. And everybody watching the video, I hope you enjoyed both of today's battles, because that's it for today. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.